What happens when someone doesn't know who they are dealing with? And most importantly, what happens when that someone decides that they will not tolerate being disrespected, no matter who the other person is? Sometimes appearances can be deceiving, and what appears to be a trivial interaction can hide a true lesson in respect, power, and humanity. In the case of Marcus Graham, what seemed like just an ordinary trip to Chicago would turn into a story of leadership, respect, and the fight against harmful attitudes, all because of a small but significant incident on a flight. On a busy Wednesday at JFK Airport, passengers hurried through the lobby, eager to board their flights. Among them was Marcus Graham, a man in his 40s, dressed simply and discreetly, jeans, a sports shirt, and a cape, looking like an ordinary passenger. However, this ordinary passenger was none other than the owner of Atlantic OC, one of the most prestigious and fastest airlines in the country. Marcus liked to travel in disguise, without anyone knowing his true identity. For him, it was a way to get a real perspective on how his flights were conducted and, more importantly, to observe the customer experience without the lens of an executive. What he wanted was to understand how his passengers were treated, in a genuine way, without the company facade. But what he didn't know was that this particular flight would make him learn more than he expected. Upon entering the departure lounge for Atlantic OC Flight 1120 to Chicago, Marcus blended in among the other passengers. He was called to board first class, and the flight attendant, Linda, was the one who greeted him. Linda seemed to be more concerned with her own mood than anything else. When Marcus handed over his ticket, she looked at him with a suspicious expression, as if she were assessing whether he really had the right to be there, at the front of the plane, among the most important passengers. "Is this your seat, sir?" Linda asked, her voice almost dismissive, as if she doubted his presence there. Marcus, without losing his composure, calmly replied, "Yes, this is my seat." He handed over the note again, hoping his confirmation would be enough. Linda looked at the note, analyzing it as if it were a tedious and unnecessary task, with no intention of being polite. "Very well, sir," she said, with a forced smile that barely disguised her sarcasm. As she walked away, Marcus could hear her muttering something to herself. A curious look crossed Marcus' mind, but he decided to ignore it. He was more interested in observing than engaging in superficial interaction. As Marcus settled in, he couldn't help but notice that Linda would occasionally cast furtive glances in his direction. He felt that something was out of place, but he preferred to continue in silence, aware that people can often be prejudiced, and he would not allow something so trivial to hinder his flight. He had seen this type of behavior before, someone who judged someone else based on their appearance, the way they dressed, or their initial impression. Linda, however, didn't stop there. When he started serving drinks in first class, Marcus ordered a Coke. His simple request seemed to be the breaking point. When she reached him, Linda's expression changed. There was a tension in the air, something Marcus felt but couldn't immediately name. She seemed visibly uncomfortable with his request. "What would you like to drink, sir?" she asked, trying to hide the disdain in her voice. "A Coke, please," Marcus said politely, waiting for the answer. He knew that on first-class flights, passengers typically had a wide range of beverage options, from fine wines to sophisticated cocktails. But he, always practical, only wanted what seemed simplest and most refreshing. Linda looked at him for a moment, almost as if she was trying to understand the reason for his request. "We have a selection of fine wines and cocktails," she said, with a tone that almost sounded like she was giving him a second chance to change his mind. "Are you sure you want a Coke?" Marcus' response was straightforward. "Yes, that's what I would like." She gave him a look of contempt, which he barely managed to hide. Without another word, she picked up a small bottle of Coca-Cola and, instead of serving it simply and politely, as would be expected on a first-class flight, she did something unthinkable. Without any warning or apparent reason, Linda threw the Coca-Cola directly into Marcus' face, an act that seemed more like an insult than an accidental mistake. The expression on her face was one of cold satisfaction, as if she was taking revenge for something only she knew. "Oh, sorry. It looks like the wine escaped," said Linda, without the slightest sign of remorse. The humiliation was clear, and although Marcus tried to maintain his composure, he couldn't help but realize that the attack wasn't about a simple mistake. It was something much deeper. Something that reflected a subtle but very present prejudice. With a serious expression, Marcus calmly wiped his face, trying to control the anger that was bubbling in his chest. He knew that this incident would not go without consequences. He wasn't just dealing with a simple service error. He was dealing with a lack of respect and a blatant disregard for who he was and what he stood for. "I believe that all passengers, regardless of their seat, deserve respect," Marcus said, fixing his gaze directly on Linda. She just smiled back, but the smile didn't hide the arrogance of someone who thought she had power over him. "Of course, sir," she replied with a sarcastic smile, turning to walk away. As the flight continued, Marcus was determined not to let this behavior go unnoticed. He knew that this type of attitude had no place on his aircraft, nor in any work environment. He could, like many others, have simply ignored the incident and moved on. But he knew that actions speak louder than words, and he needed to act. For him, respect was fundamental, and no one, not even someone working in their own company, should be allowed to treat others in such a cruel and dismissive way. As he approached Chicago, Marcus was already determined to take action. He called the chief flight attendant, Richard, and asked for a staff meeting after the flight. What he didn't know was that apparently simple decision would completely change the dynamics of that flight and generate consequences that none of those involved imagined. When Marcus Graham ordered a Coca-Cola instead of wine or a cocktail, he wasn't just making a personal choice. What seemed like a simple preference for a drink was, in fact, a reflection of something deeper: the importance of being treated with respect, regardless of social position, appearance, or status. However, what he didn't expect was the reaction of Linda, the flight attendant, who, with her dismissive attitude, disrespected both him and the work environment he led. The way Linda treated Marcus wasn't just a service error. It was a clear demonstration of arrogant and prejudiced behavior. She judged him based on his appearance, the simple clothes he wore, without knowing who he really was. This is a classic example of how microaggressions, subtle but harmful attitudes, can emerge in everyday situations. Although they often seem small or insignificant, these actions have the power to profoundly affect a person's self-esteem and the environment in which they find themselves. According to the American Psychological Association, APA, microaggressions can have significant adverse effects on individuals' mental and emotional health. They not only cause feelings of frustration and helplessness, but they can also increase stress and anxiety, especially when they occur in contexts where the person has no control over the situation. When Marcus was treated this way, he was not just dealing with a simple mistake, but an attitude that questioned his dignity, something that no one, regardless of their position or status, should be subjected to. Dignity as the foundation of respect. But why is dignity so important? Dignity is deeply linked to our perception of self-worth and self-respect. When someone is disrespected, as was the case with Marcus, the feeling of injustice and humiliation is almost immediate. This type of situation touches something deep within every human being: the need to be treated with equity and humanity. Dignity does not just refer to the way one behaves towards others, but also to the way one perceives oneself and stays true to one's principles, especially in situations of adversity. Marcus, throughout his interaction with Linda, maintained his calm and composure, not falling for the provocation or contempt she showed him. He knew that his dignity would not be affected by a simple disrespectful gesture from someone who didn't know him. This calm and collected reaction from Marcus, in contrast to Linda's arrogance, is a clear demonstration of how respect should be fundamental in all human interactions. A person's dignity should not be conditioned on their appearance or social status, as in the case of Marcus, who was judged based on his simple way of dressing. Dignity is something inherent to every human being, and any attitude that seeks to diminish this is, basically, an attack not only on the person, but on the very morality of those who practice it. In Marcus' case, his reaction was not just a way to defend himself, but a way to assert his own humanity and demand the same respect in return. He knew that his position should not be defined by a person like Linda, who treated him with disdain just for not recognizing him. This kind of direct confrontation with a lack of respect became an opportunity for Marcus to demonstrate what he believed was essential. Respect must be shown to everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Prejudice and arrogance in the workplace. Linda's behavior, unfortunately, is no exception. Prejudiced and arrogant attitudes, even if subtle, are still common in many professional environments. Marcus's story is a clear example of how prejudice can manifest itself in places that should be neutral and fair, such as a company that aims to provide quality service. In many cases, as it was with Linda, prejudice is disguised as small acts of contempt, such as dismissive looks or veiled comments. According to research by Harvard Business Review, a respectful work environment is a fundamental factor in organizational success. In companies where employees feel respected and valued, productivity, satisfaction, and commitment increase significantly. However, when there is disrespect, like what Marcus experienced, it can undermine the morale of the entire team and harm the work environment as a whole. The fact that Linda acted arrogantly and made a snap judgment about Marcus reflected a failure in the company's training and culture. This not only affected Marcus, but also potentially other passengers who witnessed her actions. This type of behavior, even if it seems small or isolated, has a much greater impact than many realize. It creates an atmosphere of distrust and devaluation, which, over time, can lead to a toxic and harmful work environment for everyone involved. Linda's attitude not only put Marcus in an uncomfortable position, but also showed a lack of professionalism that ultimately reflected negatively on the image of the company she represented. The impact of small actions on personal well-being. Although society often minimizes the impact of microaggressions, studies indicate that their consequences can be profound. In a study carried out by the University of California, it became clear that the accumulation of small daily aggressions can result in a significant increase in stress and anxiety levels. These effects not only affect mental well-being, but also physical health, as shown in research indicating that prolonged discrimination can lead to problems such as high blood pressure and heart disease. Marcus's reaction was exemplary. Instead of allowing himself to be dominated by Linda's behavior, he maintained his self-control and, more importantly, asserted his right to be treated with dignity. He knew that his reaction would not just be a response to the affront, but an affirmation of who he was and what he stood for. Instead of reacting with anger or violence, he chose the path of reflection and ethical action, something that would ultimately correct the injustice he had faced. What this story teaches us is that respect must be universal. Linda's behavior was a reflection of a society where, unfortunately, people are still judged by their appearance or their social status. But what Marcus showed is that everyone has the right to be treated with dignity, and any act of disrespect, no matter how small, can and should be challenged. The relevance of respect in today's world. The lesson that Marcus offers us goes beyond the simple act of not reacting to provocation. He teaches us that true strength lies in maintaining our dignity and respect, even when we are challenged. Respect is a choice that we must all make every day, regardless of the status, appearance, or social position of those around us. And above all, it is something that we must demand back, as a way of affirming ourselves as human beings, and also of building a more just and empathetic world. Ethical leadership and responsibility. When we talk about leadership, we often associate the concept with people in positions of power, such as CEOs, managers, and other positions of authority. However, leadership is not just about exerting power over others, but about inspiring, guiding, and setting an example, especially when facing challenging situations. Ethical leadership, in particular, involves making decisions based on strong moral values, acting with integrity, and taking responsibility for the consequences of our actions, something Marcus Graham demonstrated throughout his flight experience. What is ethical leadership? Ethical leadership is not just about making decisions that are moral or correct. It's about being consistent in our actions, ensuring that the values we preach are lived in our daily choices. An ethical leader cares about the well-being of everyone around him, promoting a culture of respect and integrity, without putting his own interests above those of the collective. In Marcus' case, he could have easily ignored Linda's behavior, but he chose to act. He knew that his responsibility as a leader was not just limited to managing the company, but also ensuring that all employees and passengers were treated with dignity. This is reflected in his response to Linda's actions. Rather than seek revenge or publicly humiliate the flight attendant, he chose to correct the situation constructively, through action that reflected the values he wanted to promote in his company. Responsibility and consequences. A leader's responsibility goes beyond carrying out daily tasks. It extends to the behavior of your team and the impact their decisions have on the environment around them. In the corporate context, a leader has the duty to create an organizational culture where people feel valued and respected. This means that when inappropriate behavior occurs, like what Linda demonstrated by treating Marcus with disdain, the leader must step in, correct the situation, and ensure the work environment is once again safe and respectful for everyone. When Marcus confronts Linda, he wasn't simply punishing a mistake. He was making a moral correction. Marcus' decision to address the situation after the flight and bring the team together was not just a matter of discipline, but a way to ensure everyone understood the gravity of what happened. He knew that as a leader, his responsibility was to educate his team on what it means to treat everyone with dignity, without exception, and how this reflects on the company's image and values. Marcus also made an important decision not to act impulsively, something that is essential for any ethical leader. He did not give in to the temptation to confront Linda aggressively, but maintained his calm and fair stance. He understood that by handling the situation thoughtfully, he could send a much stronger message of respect and integrity than if he had simply responded to Linda's provocation with anger or humiliation. Impact of ethical leadership in the workplace. Ethical leadership has a profound impact on organizational culture. When a leader acts with integrity and responsibility, he sets a standard of behavior for the entire team. This creates an environment where employees feel safe expressing their opinions, where mutual respect is a priority, and where disrespectful attitudes, like those Linda demonstrated, are not tolerated. According to the Harvard Business Review, companies that have a culture of ethical leadership have higher rates of employee satisfaction and greater productivity. Additionally, these environments are more inclusive and diverse, as employees know they will be treated fairly and with respect, regardless of their position or background. Marcus, by ethically correcting the situation, sent a clear signal that his company valued not only service excellence, but also the way people were treated. The impact of their actions was profound, not just for Linda, but for every team member who was present. The way he handled the situation taught a lesson about responsibility and morality, something that reverberated beyond the specific incident. He showed that as a leader he was not just interested in financial or operational results, but in building a team that followed the same principles of respect and dignity that he valued. The difference between authority and power. It is important to note that ethical leadership is not based on the exercise of power. Although Marcus had the authority to fire Linda, he didn't just use his position to exert control. He understood that true leadership comes from the influence a person has on others, based on trust and respect. The way he approached the situation, calmly and fairly, is a reflection of how a leader should behave in the face of adversity. He did not use his position to intimidate, but to educate and correct, which makes his leadership not only effective but also inspiring. True leadership does not impose rules, but teaches others to follow a journey of self-improvement and mutual understanding. In Marcus' case, he did not use the incident to assert his authority absolutely, but to strengthen his company's ethics and ensure that the correct values were followed. He knew that leadership is not about who has the most power, but about who can inspire others to act fairly, ethically, and respectfully. Conclusion of the thematic element. Marcus demonstrated in his response to the incident with Linda that ethical leadership is not just about exercising authority, but about acting with integrity and responsibility. He knew that as a leader, his mission was to teach his team to act respectfully, maintain a healthy environment, and always choose what is morally right. By acting this way, he not only corrected Linda's mistake, but also strengthened his company's values, showing everyone that true leadership is based on strong principles, responsibility, and above all, respect. A leader's responsibility goes beyond ensuring their team meets work standards. It includes shaping the behavior of those under your leadership and teaching, through your actions, what it means to act with respect, empathy, and fairness. What Marcus did was not only make an ethical decision, but also inspire everyone around him to follow those same principles. Impact of leadership and collective justice. When Marcus revealed his identity to the team, the impact was immediate. The atmosphere on board the aircraft, previously tense and uncomfortable, was transformed by the clarity with which he demonstrated his commitment to justice and the values he believed were fundamental. It was not just about correcting an isolated error, but about establishing a culture of respect and responsibility that should be reflected by everyone, both within the aircraft and in all aspects of the company. Justice as a pillar of leadership. Marcus knew that true leadership was not about punishing or reprimanding those who made mistakes, but about educating and recognizing the importance of a culture based on justice. When he confronted Linda, his intention was not to humiliate or degrade her, but to teach her the impact his actions had not only on him, but on the entire crew and passengers. He demonstrated that true justice is not vindictive. It is restorative, seeking to correct harmful behavior without resorting to destroying the person. By acting this way, Marcus was not just resolving a specific incident, but shaping the behavior of his entire team. He showed that, at his company, the core values of respect and integrity were not just empty words, but principles that guided all interactions and decisions. He didn't let Linda's mistake go without consequence, but he made sure it was a learning opportunity for everyone, reinforcing the idea that actions have consequences and that everyone is responsible for the environment they help create. Transforming the environment with collective justice. The concept of collective justice becomes evident when we observe how correcting Linda's mistake not only affects her, but the entire team. When Marcus spoke to the remaining flight attendants, he was not just reprimanding Linda, but reinforcing an organizational culture where everyone was responsible for maintaining standards of respect and professionalism. This created an environment where shared responsibility became one of the pillars of effective leadership. By approaching the team respectfully but firmly, Marcus made sure everyone understood the importance of acting collectively to ensure passengers were treated with the dignity they deserved. This notion of collective justice is fundamental to creating a culture where all members of an organization feel empowered to act correctly, without fear of retaliation or ignorance. By advocating ethical behavior, Marcus turned the incident into a lesson for everyone, showing how each person within the team had the power to positively influence the work environment. The impact of his action was also reflected in how other team members began to reevaluate their own attitudes. Marcus's example demonstrated that, in a culture of respect and fairness, team members are not just passive observers of others' failures, but active participants in creating a more fair space. This has caused other employees to rethink their own interactions with passengers, paying more attention to what constitutes appropriate and respectful treatment. The importance of right action. Fairness in the workplace is not just a matter of treating everyone equally, but of ensuring that everyone receives treatment appropriate to their needs and rights. Marcus acted fairly by ensuring that Linda was confronted about her behavior, but also by ensuring that she had a chance to learn from her mistake. He did not seek revenge, but corrected the situation constructively. He was not only correcting Linda's mistake, but also creating a model for others to understand what ethical leadership should look like. His stance as a leader shows that justice, when applied fairly and equitably, can transform the work environment, creating a culture where respect is more than a value, but a daily practice. Marcus did not use his authority to punish Linda excessively, but used it to restore balance within his team, reaffirming that ethical action is always more powerful than the simple imposition of authority. The lasting impact on organizational culture. At the end of the incident, Marcus not only corrected Linda's behavior, but also reinforced the principles of dignity and respect within his organization. He transformed a simple mistake into an opportunity for collective growth, where everyone involved, including passengers, began to realize the value of ethical leadership. He demonstrated that, in a corporate environment, leaders have the power to influence the attitudes and actions of others, creating a culture where justice and respect become the pillars that support the integrity of the company. This type of leadership not only improves team morale, but also has a lasting impact on the success of the organization. When leaders act ethically, as Marcus did, they inspire others to follow their example, creating a positive organizational dynamic where everyone feels empowered to act correctly, fairly, and respectfully. This culture of respect ends up being reflected in customer service, internal relationships, and daily interactions, creating a virtuous cycle of responsibility and goodwill. Marcus, by demonstrating ethical leadership and promoting collective justice, not only corrected an isolated failure, but established a model for his company and his team. His ability to act fairly and respectfully, without resorting to retaliation or punishment, made him a true leader, someone who not only held power, but knew how to use it to improve and inspire others. His attitude not only affected Linda's behavior, but also had a lasting effect on everyone present, demonstrating how collective justice can shape a strong and respectful organizational culture. Marcus Graham didn't just correct a mistake, he created lasting change. By handling the situation ethically and firmly, he not only defended his own dignity, but also strengthened the pillars of respect and integrity within his company. His leadership was not about authority or punishment, but about teaching, guiding, and above all, showing that respect is the basis of everything. In a world where interactions are often defined by appearances and quick judgments, true strength lies in staying true to one's principles. Marcus reminds us that true leadership is about acting fairly, not being afraid to stand up to what is wrong, and at the same time offering others the opportunity to grow. He challenges us to think, how do we choose to act when faced with injustice? The impact of your actions goes far beyond this incident. Marcus demonstrated that even in the most challenging situations, We have the power to change the culture around us through leadership that values respect and dignity above all else. And the question that remains is, what would you do in his place? What legacy do you want to leave in your own life and in the environment you are in?